Welcome to New Orleans. In order to understand New Orleans as you're walking around the French Quarter, it's really important to understand the history of New Orleans. Because maybe you're walking around the French Quarter and you're like, this looks really Spanish. So allow me to give you a couple thousand years of history in under 10 minutes. People have visited this area of the world where we're standing right now in Jackson Square for thousands of years. There were a lot of indigenous tribes that lived around here, and they met in New Orleans, and they traded here where the French market is for thousands of years. They had ceremonies here, they met each other. They called this area the land of Bolbancha, the land of many tongues. Fast forward to the 1600s, and there's a French explorer sailing down the Mississippi, and he claims the entire Louisiana Valley for the French. But you can't just claim it, you have to stake a claim. So in 1718, or perhaps a little before, the French king sends two French-Canadian brothers, Bienville and Iberville, to find a place to put a city on the Mississippi River to claim it for France. Bienville had been traveling since he was a teenager. He had actually lived with the indigenous people, and he spoke their language. They told him that in this very spot there was a secret. So now, if you leave New Orleans and head for the Gulf of Mexico, it's 100 miles down the coast, and it's pretty treacherous. There's a lot of sandbars, there's a lot of navigating to be done, strong current. If you're taking a cruise ship out of here, you know that it takes most of the day. What the indigenous people told Bienville is that right here where New Orleans stands today, you could do a mile portage over land. You would hit the Bayou St. John. The Bayou St. John dumps into Lake Pontchartrain, which is not a lake, but an estuary of the Gulf of Mexico. So you could bring your goods down the Mississippi River and with a mile portage be in the Gulf of Mexico. So Bienville in 1718 decided this was the place where we would establish New Orleans, named after the Duke of Orleans. So he writes off to the King of France and he says, we found a place for the city, please send people. So the King of France goes to his people and he goes, you know all those colonies in the Americas where they're finding diamonds and gold? We have one now. Would you like to get rich? And so all these explorers come over and they're looking for diamonds and gold. New Orleans is built on a whole lot of clay, hundreds of feet of clay below us, not a single stone. We import our bricks. So they write to the King of France and they say, hey, we're hungry, send farmers. Well, at this point, everybody has heard that there's no diamonds and gold in New Orleans, and so they're not very interested in going, and the king has to go to the prisons and to the streets. So he gets prisoners from the prisons, he gets prostitutes from the streets, and he puts them into boats and sends them over to the Americas. They get here, they're ready to party, they celebrate Mardi Gras from the very beginning, but there's not a single farmer among them. So they write off to the King of France and they say, hey, we're hungry, send farmers. So the King of France goes to the area that later became Germany, and it's an area in great strife at this time, and he says, hey, if you go to our new territory in Louisiana, there are big mountains with lots of snow. I don't know about you, but I'm not seeing a lot of snow around here or a lot of mountains. But they came. And those Germans settled here, they stayed, they settled in the German coast upriver. And between the Germans and the indigenous people, those first colonists did not starve. But under the French, this was never a very successful colony. They kind of broke even. So fast forward to the French-Indian War, and France is in a war with the UK. They don't want the UK to get Louisiana Territory because they already have the Northeast, what later becomes America. So the King of France gives the whole Louisiana Territory to his cousin, the King of Spain. Spain has run colonies for a long time in the Americas. They're very successful. They send over a governor and they really don't want to upset the French people that live here. So the governor doesn't even come into New Orleans. He settles down coast. He wants to keep things kind of quiet and status quo. The French are offended. Not only did this guy not come into town and meet them, he didn't have any ceremony. There was no handover. He didn't even bother to meet them. And now they have to drink Spanish wine. So they're not happy. So they stage a rebellion, and along with the Germans up coast, they throw out the Spanish and send them back. Spain goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. We have a lot of colonies in the Americas, and they cannot be thinking they're independent. So they send in the big guns. They sent in General Alejandro O'Reilly. That's right. It's an Irishman serving in the Spanish Navy out of Cuba. He comes in with thousands of troops. He invites all the ringleaders to dinner at his house. And then he hangs 6 of them at the base of Frenchman Street. The rest of them he sends off to prison in Cuba. So he's put down the rebellion. He's not a very well-liked guy. But under the Spanish, New Orleans actually flourishes. The Spanish knew how to run a colony. They knew how to have governors with fixed terms. They didn't make the French speak Spanish, although many of them did learn it. They married French women that lived here. Thanks to some great fires that happened, they gave us our current infrastructure. They gave us our streets. It was our first police force, our first firefighting force. They gave us a lot of structure and brought a lot of good to the city. But in spite of some huge efforts from the Spanish, New Orleans was never a really profitable colony. So fast forward to about 1800, Spain is now in a war with the British. They don't want this colony to fall to the British because then they would have both the Americas and the Mississippi River, and that would be a lot of power in their enemies' hands. So the King of Spain reaches out to France and he asks Napoleon, would you like the Louisiana Territories? Napoleon's an emperor. Of course he would love more territories, so he says yes. He now has Louisiana Territories. He also has Haiti. And so he sends his troops to claim it. He sends thousands of troops to Haiti where they fight a horrible, awful, terrible, extremely bloody battle against the mosquito. Most of his troops die of yellow fever. So Napoleon is back in France, probably sitting in his Palace of Versailles and trying to figure out what he's going to do. He has no troops to put down the rebellion in Haiti. He has no troops to send to New Orleans to claim it. And there's a knock on the door. And they say, Your Majesty, the Ambassador Livingston and the American Secretary of State, James Monroe, are here to see you. In they come. And now what the Americans really want is they want the right to put their goods in the New Orleans port, because they are shipping all of the goods from the Americas down the Ohio Valley, down the Mississippi River, and they want a place to stage it before it goes off into the rest of the world. So they just want the right to put their stuff here. So they go in to negotiate that. They offer $5 million to Napoleon for the city of New Orleans, the port, of course. And Napoleon says, how about $15 million and I'll throw in all Louisiana territories, like 14 states worth of land, into the package. Now, they didn't have $15 million, but that's another story. And they say yes. And so at this point, New Orleans becomes American. Now, if you think the French were unhappy about becoming Spanish, just imagine their reaction to becoming American. So now, not only, well, there's no American wine. So not only are they not drinking wine, the Americans drink whiskey. And they're not Catholic. And at that time in New Orleans, you had to be Catholic to live here. The Americans are Protestants. They don't celebrate Mardi Gras. They, in general, don't party and dance as much at all. And they're very focused on making money and commerce. And they don't speak any romantic language whatsoever. They speak English. So the French are not happy. And so when the Americans come in, we actually end up with several governments, 3 of them, 2 of which spoke French and 1 which spoke English. The Americans settle uptown. There's a lot of division in those days, but eventually we work through it and we work it out. During the early 1800s, we see a lot of immigrants. We see in particular a couple of big groups that reinforce the French-speaking nature of this city. So we see a lot of refugees from Haiti, a lot of free people of color, and a lot of people that speak French. And we see a lot of refugees from Canada, the Acadians that later become our current day Cajuns, so also French speaking. Fast forward to the Civil War. New Orleans had a slave trade, but its economy was very different than the rest of the southern United States. And so when the Union troops showed up, they did not put up a huge fight. So the Union quickly overran the city. They did not destroy the French Quarter, and we did not lose a lot of people in the battle. After the Civil War, a lot of our free people of color lost a lot of their rights. We continue to get a lot of immigrants from around the world. A lot come from Ireland, a lot come from Italy, a lot of Germans come. Because of this melting pot that we have from the Africans that came as enslaved people, from the Europeans that had their music and their traditions, from all of the immigrants that we get jazz music in the early 1900s. Fast forward a little bit, we have Prohibition. New Orleans survived Prohibition by drinking and by supplying the rest of the country with alcohol as well. A lot of civil rights movement activity happened in New Orleans. And then we pretty much, we'll just fast forward to current day. So that is like several thousand years of history in under 10 minutes. So next time you're studying for your history test, call me. But in the meantime, as you're wandering around New Orleans, notice the French elements, the Spanish elements, the American elements, and all of our immigrants that came over, all of the influence of our free people of color. New Orleans is really a melting pot. It's actually more like a gumbo, where all of those different people retained some of their identity and added to the overall culture of New Orleans. So please enjoy your time in New Orleans, and I hope that history helps you appreciate it even more.